Go ahead and hear from Jennifer Remmers. She is the ACORNS lead at Sonoma County Indian Health Project, and her focus this project year has been strengthening clinical community linkages. And she will go ahead and start. And I think, Monica, we're going to record this, just so you know.
No pressure.
No pressure.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure moving forward. I apologize, I don't do video very well. I promise I will give a better presentation if I'm not on camera. So we'll try and let the slides do it for me.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. Hopefully it will do. Okay. So just a little bit about what I've been doing during our last couple of years for the ACORNS grant. A lot of what we did is we kind of started more with the wellness aspect of things. We focused on our employees as one of our populations, and then we kind of branched out into some of our patients. And we really tried to do a lot more of that kind of physical activity in the building and all that stuff that we kind of do in our regular everyday lives. And so we kind of got to this point in our third year of our ACORNS grant where we really wanted to focus more on kind of cementing all the stuff that we were really doing and making it more of a long-term thing that could last. I mean, that's sort of what we all want. We all want some form of legacy. We want this idea that our programs that we spend all this time building will actually stay behind after we go. So that was kind of more of what we're focusing on in this year of our ACORNS. And so a little bit of how I've kind of tried to tackle that problem is the first thing I did was I kind of split what we're doing into two different categories. One was either, is this something that we're already doing and it's just kind of trying to like cement it or strengthen it? Or is it, you know, do we want to look at new problems? And of course, there's different ways for tackling each one of those. And so just kind of separating that into two different things. Sometimes the key of knowing like where to focus in your next grant year is really just kind of looking at, well, what do we have as far as our resources? What are we able to tackle? Because we're always going to have a list of things that we want to do. But, you know, we lose team members, or we've only got so much money, we've only got so much time. So that's kind of the first thing that we look at. The other thing is that obviously developing new relationships or making new connections within your community are very, very vital, but sometimes we want to look at strengthening what we already have first. So if we look at our second box, it's kind of like, what are we already doing? Is there a way that we can put that into writing? In our 2016 to 2017 year, we were focusing more on wellness, and it took us almost an entire year to get a wellness policy actually written, approved, and had all like the commentary put in and voted in. And it took a really long time. And so the other thing is that just remembering that other members of your team, they may not be a part of your team now, but they're probably in your building, or maybe you can bring them in, is that having that community health representative, or if you've got, we don't have CHRs in our building, but we do have transporters. So they're kind of like informal CHRs. And sometimes even just having a conversation with those people is so important to kind of try and figure out like the other things that are going on in your building that maybe other people are doing, and we can focus on that and develop that. With developing new relationships, one of the things I've done this year with Redwood Empire, we've got a drop point at our clinic where they come in and bring food for some of our diabetic patients. And so it's kind of one of those, we were doing sort of the same thing. We had a lot of the same goals, but we just weren't aligned. Like we had a working relationship with one another, but sort of putting that into a more formal relationship and developing an MOU with them ended up being a really good way of making that more of a long-term relationship and really kind of cementing that. And we both got better, you know, more resources out of that. So just part of that strengthening, really the key to doing all of this is just starting from the place of building a very strong foundation, and having buy-in, obviously, from management or admin is so very important. Sometimes even getting management or admin interested in what you're doing is the most important thing that you can focus on, because they're just like, yeah, whatever, you've got your grant, go do your thing. But trying to find something that everybody actually gets excited about. And obviously everybody is going to speak a different language. Sometimes, you know, your admin team really wants to see data and they want to see all of that backup. And sometimes they're really more of a anecdotal evidence. They want to see like, well, I've had 4 people come into my office in the last, you know, month and a half, 2 months saying that they really don't have any place to park their bike, and what are they going to do? And they're trying to be healthy about coming to work, but they don't have this resource, so what do we do? So it's a little bit of both, and creating anecdotal evidence or putting it into more of a quantitative state is also a great thing, because it's great for your bookkeeping, it's great for your record keeping, but sometimes it just, everybody speaks a different language with how they get excited about a project that you're working on, so kind of trying to remember that. So hopefully you've already got a work group with the things that you're already doing. If not, creating it is also incredibly important. And then just being very mindful of everybody's time. We all have extremely limited amounts of time. Not all of us can travel within the community. If you have community members that are helping and sitting on those work groups, not everybody can come to your office. You can't necessarily go to their office. So that's where meetings like this become very vital. We can call in, we can check in with one another, and we can make that time. The other thing I found that things like Doodle online has been a huge help for me, which is where you can basically send an email out to group members and say, here's 7 possibilities of when we can meet up. Can you do any of these? And really just sort of letting that do its own thing and cinching down time where we can all make even 15 to 20 minutes to sit down and figure out what we need to do next. And then the other thing, of course, is making sure that that's a constant. With my schedule, if I don't set something a month to 2 months in advance, it's probably not going to happen. I'm going to get to the week of the event and I'm like, I am short-staffed. I have to run across town. I've got this happening. I've got that happening. So really just kind of being like, we are going to meet at least once a month and committing to it is another like super, super vital part of like keeping that strong relationship. So again, for that kind of memorandum of agreement or memorandum of understanding, depending on who you ask, they really kind of are the same idea. One, of course, an agreement, you're both agreeing to do something, whereas a memorandum of understanding is more like we understand that we have a working relationship together and we have a commitment to this common goal. If you ask it from a lawyer's point of view, they will tell you that they're basically the same. Neither one is really what you would consider a legally binding document, which is the reason that you are usually able to at least get those when you're working with people in public health and things like that, because you don't have to have them, you know, have their legal team review it. No one's actually like agreeing to something that is going to commit their particular building to doing something that, you know, might be negative down the line. It's usually just you guys are agreeing to do something common. And so for us, what we did with Redwood Empire Food Bank, we created an MOU that basically had stated any patients that come in and see us that are looking for food assistance, that are meeting a certain criteria, that they are type 2 diabetic, which, you know, obviously we have a huge population, we would refer out to them so that they can be involved in their program, because they're a grant program. So for them, they, you know, obviously they're trying to serve as many people as possible in their population. And in exchange, they had stated if they come across anybody that they're helping with any of their boxes that basically are native and they are without health care or they need specific nutrition counseling, they will refer them back to us to make sure that we are really kind of finding that kind of portion of our population that maybe isn't coming in for regular health care, or they have needs that we're not aware of. And so making sure that they really get in the door and they're getting the health care that we need to provide anyway. So it's really, it's just an easy relationship. We're both doing the same thing. We're both trying to help diabetic patients. We're both trying to help native diabetic patients. So that was part of it. And the other thing is that during those drops, what we're doing is when they come in and do those diabetic boxes, obviously they're able to buy in quantity and they tend to offer certain types of food, not a whole lot of fresh produce. So what we're offering is kind of, we've already got RDs on staff. We already have people that do things like this. So being able to be there, help kind of supplement some of their boxes with fresh fruits and vegetables that are either coming out of the garden or that we have here, and then offering a little bit of education or showing how to kind of cook the foods that they're getting. So again, it's just really like those things we were both already doing, we just made a formal relationship out of it. When you're in the policy development end of it, again, that goes into our wellness policy. Our wellness policy was something we had worked on for the first year or two of our ACORNS grant. We had developed a wellness committee for our employees. Everybody was working together. We were having regular meetings. It was really just kind of cementing that, because I'm not always going to be here. Members of the team are not always, not going to be here forever. So making sure that there's that commitment, that the clinic has said that they will have a working wellness policy, that they will offer healthy fruits and vegetables or good choices at meetings. They will offer exercise breaks. They will make sure that they have a committee of employees that are basically committed towards trying to create healthy options for their employees. So it's, again, that kind of lasting idea. And the third one I put in there, a declaration or proclamation. That's something that I've actually seen the state do in a couple of different instances with things like breastfeeding, where maybe you're not going to get a formal agreement out of it. Maybe there's not going to be a policy. Maybe it's just something that you do, but it's having it displayed or prominent within your building, your gym, whatever it is again, that kind of constant reminder. And it seems silly. It may, it doesn't really hold anybody to anything, but it is a nice extra little kind of boost to really sort of strengthen, like, this is what we're doing. This is what we're committed to. This is our goal. And again, knowing your resources of how we would create these things. You can get MOU templates online. There's actually one on the CDC website. A lot of like Department of Public Health or schools or things like that, they are doing things. They've been forming community linkages with local farms or with other programs. So they're doing the same thing. Don't be afraid to ask other programs. And the same thing even with just other ACORNS grantees. I mean, obviously we work with Yakayama and we try and make sure that we help them when they're going to be planting and giving them an idea of different things that they can offer, and they come and offer produce to us, and we make sure that it gets out into the community, of just having those linkages in the community that help strengthen what we're already doing, and just not being afraid to ask. I've definitely asked Redwood Empire. We ran into a small problem where when I originally tried to create an MOU with them, Allison there was like, oh yeah, I'll just send you our contract, no problem. You can sign it and you can become a partner. Well, the contract was actually for their grant, basically saying that we agree to help this population, which was just any population that was looking for assistance with food, which unfortunately conflicts with the population we're trying to help. So, but they did have a sample MOU from different programs they had done before, and so we had something to already build from, which was really nice. And then, obviously during our resource meeting, the last one that we had, a lot of sharing of different policies or MOUs that people have done that are ACORNS grantees are, they were put on a drive for us. So being able to pull from that and really develop from it it's great. It's already there for you. So, so then moving into, if you've already got your existing, what about if you're developing something new? Well, obviously where you would start with that is a little bit different. Doing an assessment is always key. We did one for ACORNS when we first started out, if you guys remember way back when. Some of those are either no longer valid, or obviously those things hopefully have changed because we've been tackling those problems one by one. But even going back to that template, which is just really a questionnaire, and seeing where you are now is so very vital. But there is so many resources online on doing needs assessments. I know that like NNH has one. I think there's a couple of like colleges and schools that have them. So you can do it as formally or informally as you want. Obviously, a formal assessment gives you all that good, wonderful data that we all love. But again, depending on where you're getting your buy-in, because that's really what we're doing. Again, we're building a strong foundation so that we keep buy-in all the way through. If you've got a board that really just wants to hear a lot of just anecdotal evidence, they want to hear their patients saying this and this happened and it was great, or they want to hear that kind of verbal feedback, then have a group discussion or host a meeting and, just have some snacks or something like that. We always like to bribe people with food, bring them in, have them tell their story about what they need or what they want, and then just make sure you keep very good minutes on it. So there's a couple of different ways you can do that assessment. The other thing that I found is I had this problem with one of my team members, is not confusing an assessment with an evaluation, because we had a couple of meetings where we would sit down and we started talking about things that we were already doing and how to improve it. And I was like, well, that's QI and that's really evaluation for the stuff that we're doing. We're building something new. So it's great because it brings up all of those measurable things that you want, but make sure that you're really assessing a current problem of what needs to be done. Where are you focusing, kind of where it's going, versus how well are we doing something that we already do, unless of course like you're failing so miserably at something, or the structure of how you do, you know, create or deliver services is so broken that you need to completely overhaul it, then yeah, that would be a current problem. And I think the only time when assessment really is not where you would start when you're creating something new is just you have this super time sensitive window of you've got money to spend or people or volunteers that are only available for summer, say, you know, since a lot of us just did that and they're going to go back to school. Then maybe that would be the best time to do some more of an informal, like, let's have a quick meeting, let's do it, like, let's go. And so that's a good way to just kind of gauge where to start that. So again, just when you're building that needs assessment, there is just a list of places that you can go to. Like I said, the HHS, I know that they've got some needs assessments on theirs. I know that the CDC has a lot of information on how to gather data or prevention services or things like that that you can build into, like, this is our standard, this is what we're going towards. IHS has tons of videos online. We used it when we were doing care team building of how we wanted to do certain types of exams or how we wanted to deliver services to patients. So just remembering, I have a 16-year-old that I tell her all the time, she'll ask me a question and I say, you have this supercomputer in your hand. That is what your cell phone is. Don't be afraid to look things up. There is so much online. And again, that anecdotal evidence, if you're having conversations with people, if they're telling you things that they need, do not be afraid to write them down and record them. So my anecdotal story, which Geneva asked me to tell, so I will try and remember. When we started our wellness policy, when we first started kind of doing this change of our worksite wellness kind of thing, one of the first things we started with was, you know, the signs we put up around the clinic, the reminders about exercise, but also at our all staff meeting, we changed the food entirely. We made sure that we weren't offering pastries and things like that, that we were doing like yogurt and granola. We were making sure there was water. We were doing stretching exercises every single time. And we were really kind of just changing the culture. And it seems really slow to start. And it seems like you get a lot of grumbling and things like that. But then last year we had a new COO come in. And one of the first things that he wanted to do is he was like, oh, well, I'm going to bring stuff to the meeting. And he showed up and brought pastries to the meeting after I had already kind of like done my usual coming in and getting everything set up. And I had hard-boiled eggs and we were doing fruit and things like that. And he came back and said, you know, I'm not going to touch that anymore. I got a lot of dirty looks. People were not very happy about me showing up with those. And so it seems really small, but that was a great reminder of like, hey, that culture change, like things have changed. It took a really long time, but people actually want that healthier food now. They are used to it. That's kind of how things are for them. So that was a great reminder. So then just remember when you're going through, you've got all your data, you've got an assessment, whether it's formal or informal, it should be a pretty clear idea of what you're going to be focusing on. Again, I know that when we did our first ACORNS assessment, there was usually like 2 or 3 different things that kind of popped up and then we could choose what to focus on. But really kind of figuring out how you want to prioritize your goal from here should be gauged by your work team. It should be pretty obvious that the people you're working with, hopefully it's not just you, although that's been me on a couple of occasions. Hopefully your work team will kind of be enthusiastic about one thing. So that should really be where you want to focus because you want to have that momentum of your group to really kind of push you forward. Again, there were things that I wanted to focus on where I was like, oh, that'd be really great if we could have weekly huddles, if we're really like getting involved more with our providers and getting RDs in there every single day. I can tell you that was not a priority of anybody else except the RDs. But everybody was really happy about creating care teams and being better about communication in different ways. And so that became like, okay, well, that's our goal, very obviously. And again, an easy way to prioritize your goals, what can you do? We all have these amazing pie in the sky dreams of what we would love to do. But, you know, we are sometimes only us and maybe 1 or 2 other people on our teams. And so what's, you know, maybe it's too big to tackle, or maybe it's something you can split into a couple years of your grant. And really being able to see that for what it is it's sometimes it's a little humbling, but it's a good idea. And then again, that ACORNS needs assessment was really good about scoring your data and the responses. So it should like be one of those like, okay, this very obviously is the thing that you need to work on the most. I've done it where we've even voted. You know, we came in pretty even on a couple of different problems that we were, you know, looked at signage in the building versus policies versus the you know, menu breakdown in our cafeteria. And we ended up voting on what we wanted to focus on for the first year, because it's just easier that we all agree on where we're going and we know exactly where we're pointing. So an action plan is just a fancy word for a numbered list, in my opinion. You've got your work group. Hopefully you have a very clear idea of where you're going. And then making sure you have some way of measuring what you're doing, how many people you're going to serve, how it's going to be kind of ranked out. So you basically, you know, you've got your plan, do, SCIHP kind of all spelled out. And it just, again, these are all really just building a foundation. You're creating new things. So for us, again, it was, we were sitting and we were doing an assessment and we were like, well, we're still really having a problem with having more interaction between nutrition and medical and behavioral health. And so that was one of the things that we chose to focus on, was doing more of a conjoined care team. And that's sort of what we're doing on Mondays and Wednesdays now. And our action plan obviously is like making sure that we have assigned dates, because we all have busy days. And so if we don't assign clinic time, then it's just going to get pushed down. And then we've done surveys with our patients on how well they're liking that kind of group care approach, and they're loving it. So far, everyone's been thrilled about it. We have a couple of people that are like, yeah, I don't feel very comfortable about having a group come in the room. But for the most part, we've actually had a huge positive surge on how we're seeing patients with that. So for us, it was just, we had a couple of things we wanted to focus on, and really for, you know, making sure that we've got an LCSW and somebody that reports to the county if they need to, or we have other resources that we get them. We have all of those things sort of pulled together in this sort of big picture of how we approach our patients and getting them the most amount of resources as possible. So again, I just love this picture because it sort of pulls all of those same ideas together. Like, we're building bigger, better programs, things that help our patients more. People in our community are benefiting just because we're pulling all of these people that are all using these resources or doing their own thing, and making sure that we've got them together into one big picture kind of project. And it tends to have its own momentum when we do that. So, you know, we've got the kids in our after school program that sometimes can help us with the other things that we're doing with our seniors or our elders, or they're talking to other people and letting them know about the other programs that we have offered. As is, you know, happens in the tribal community, we just, a lot of word of mouth gets through, and then there's a kind of an excitement that builds of people that go to classes or getting certain kind of care that they tell other people. And so that's been a super positive too. So it's really just a reminder of like making sure we take advantage of everybody in the community, people that are doing the same things as us, people that want to affect the same people as we do. I've done some cross trainings even on the administration of aging, because they're, you know, sometimes getting into the Native population and helping my elders, and then they become more aware when I come in and let them know about what's going on in our community. And so there's a lot more back and forth. And so just really, really kind of fleshing out, really developing and strengthening our programs through bringing everybody in from the get-go. So again, when we're doing new written agreements, our MOUs I love just because it usually opens the door to making things more formal. Don't be afraid to ask. I generally find a lot of people that I ask, like, would you be willing to do an MOU or an MOA? The number one question I get is, what's that? And I would have to talk to my boss or my parent agency. And if you're really good about the way you market this, you shouldn't really have a whole lot of problem. Again, with Redwood Empire, they're largely donation and grant driven. And so for them, it ended up being an easy sell because it looks good for their grant too to have an MOU or an MOA with somebody else. They're like, look, we're achieving our goals. We've got this formal relationship with another community member. So having that, and I'm looking into it again because I've gone over and helped teach with the Administration on Aging now. I would love to kind of get same thing. Okay, well, I'll come and I'll teach for you once a year if you come and you do some kind of teaching for my senior population at least once a year, or you talk about coming in and figuring out how you need to have your family members help as caregivers, and can they get a reimbursement for that, or whatever it is. It's just making sure that they come and educate my population, I'll come educate their employees, and having that so that it continues on year after year. So yeah, it's something that both parties should actually be excited about. It should make both of you look better, honestly, so it should be a no-brainer. And then if nothing else, when you've got somebody who's bigger than you, they will very often have a legal team. So don't be afraid to ask, like, well, hey, well, can your legal team put something together for us? You know, even if they did tell us what you need to have an indemnification clause, fine, you put that together and we'll look at it. But yeah, and make sure you keep copies of everything, because that is the thing, is things happen, life happens. Sometimes we have other places that we go, and so having all of those MOUs there to let everybody know, like, no, this is an agreement, this is something that's happening, enforce it, this is the paperwork that goes with it, making sure that it's very accessible, that it's on a shared drive, that you've got other team members that know about it. So yeah, I mean, that's, again, with Redwood Empire Food Bank, we had that agreement because they were like, no, just sign this contract saying you're a partner. No. So it took us a very long time to actually understand why I wasn't going to sign it. And it took them even longer to realize, oh, well, this is really easy what you're asking for, actually. Well, yeah, let's just do that. But sometimes that communication takes a really long time to get through. So be persistent. So again, this is just an example of one of the templates you can get online for a memorandum of understanding. You know, talking about, okay, well, so we're both serving this population. The goal is to make sure that so-and-so will do so-and-so, and we will this, and, you know, it's helping us. Funding, half the time I leave it out. I've done it on, God, that was years ago. I've had one MOU where it was, they gave us $1,000 in exchange for helping them with some of their reporting, which really was a single page of, like, we had so many people referred to us. So half the time I'll leave that out. I mean, obviously, if you think that there's a partner in the community that's willing to pay you, by all means, find those people. But it, like I said, I think this one was from the CDC website. There's a few out there that you can get that just give you it's a very, very basic idea. But it makes everybody have a very clear idea of what they're doing, and it really does cement your relationship moving forward. And I have a few on my drive, so if anybody's interested in a couple other like templates, I'm happy to share them. Just let me know. And then I had to add this in. This was our wellness policy. This is actually one of, I think, 5 pages. And this guy took us a while. It was a year or so before we really got it through. And it doesn't really say a whole lot other than we're committed to being a healthy company, basically. I mean, that our nonprofit is completely geared towards helping our people, both our patients and our employees, stay healthy. And it goes, you know, I use the Healthy People 2020 ideals of sort of what we should be doing. So it was a real easy kind of, that was sort of what I put in our resources. So don't be afraid to kind of take something that you find online that they've listed as the ideals, as your benchmarking, and include it, because all it does is sort of bolster, like, this is why we're trying to do this. This is the accepted standard. This is why we're doing it. So again, I'm happy to share a copy of this, but really it's just saying that we will offer exercise at meetings, that we will offer healthier choices, that it's mostly going to be water that we offer as drinks, not sodas or things like that. So it's a real basic framework, but it is nice to have it formal and it's in writing, and it's not just housed in my nutrition department. It is for all of SCIHP, so that's super nice. And then finally, just kind of remember, when you build that huge foundation, when you've got all those people in from the beginning, when you've got admin aware of what you're doing, when you've got management or your care team is excited about where you're going, and that you've all picked it together and you've got the data to back it up, like, that's how things last. And that really is kind of where sustainability comes from, because hopefully after a while it should float up to the top that you guys are all really doing it anyway, and it's great to have the funding, but hopefully it should slowly start to support itself so that it doesn't require grant funding year after year after year, because that's kind of what we're all focusing on, right? So that's it. That's all I have. If anybody has any questions?
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And if you guys, and this kind of goes for you as well, Jamali, but okay with if we share your slides as a PDF for folks that weren't able to join, we'll also share the recording. But
yeah, of course.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any questions from anybody at the moment? I really love your language about leaving a legacy. You know, all of us or all of you guys are working really hard in your communities to promote health and wellness, you know, and what is that legacy going to look like, you know, and what is our lasting impact going to be on our communities? So I appreciate that perspective. So if there aren't any questions, we'll move over to Jamali, and you can feel free to share your screen. Nice. Okay. And then just so everybody knows, there will be a brief poll at the end of all of you, at the end of all of this, so don't hang up too quick.
All right. So we did a nutrition guideline policy for our clinic. And going back to what Jennifer mentioned, we had a needs assessment, and we work closely with our community advocates. We have 2 representatives of our 6 local tribes. The nutrition guidelines for staff events was put as a priority for our community. So we developed that, and I'll go over how we did it. Let's see if I can move this slide. Okay. So the goals of this presentation is to increase our knowledge in the steps needed to increase, to create a nutrition policy, and for us was specifically for our clinic, and also inspire you, and I think Jennifer did a good job to educate your community that creating a healthy environment is a benefit for all, that is helpful for all of us. So what are these steps? So for us, the first step was to find out what are the pros and what are the cons. You know, as Jennifer mentioned, there's a lot of things that we can focus on. So why do we want to focus on a nutrition policy, and what are some of the benefits, and what will be some of the things that we want to consider before we go into it? So for a clinic, one of the big concerns about doing a nutrition policy and changing the guidelines of eating is the cost. So as you know, there is a myth that healthy food costs a lot more than unhealthy food. So they will worry about, this is going to be really expensive if we are encouraged to always have healthy foods. And then patients are not going to eat it. They don't like fruits. They want their soda, they want their sweets, or they want their pastries. You know, so it's going to be a lot of waste. So that was one of our challenges. But when we did a survey, and this is part of an assessment that I mentioned later, 85% of the employees said that it was very important for a clinic to set a good example as a healthcare organization by offering healthy food options at events. So yes, there was concerns about cost and waste, but there was a good sense that, yes, we need to do this. This is important for our organization. So the second step is assessment of what is happening currently. So we were able to use SurveyMonkey. So we really like that because you can create a link and send it to everybody in the organization. They can click to the link and get this, answer the survey. It only took like 2 minutes. And we got this beautiful report of what people are saying, what were people's thoughts about where we were in regards to a healthy policy. So 51% of the 106 employees said that there are healthy food options at most staff meetings and events. So 51 is not really your ideal number. You know, only 0.5% of the time there's healthy food options. So there was work to do. 81% said they will support our health guidelines requiring healthy foods at staff meetings and events. And 22 responded there are enough healthy food options available in the break room. So 22 of 100, so that means that 87% 78% didn't think we had healthy foods available on the break room. So definitely there was work to do on creating a healthy policy that could help have healthy foods at staff and events, and there was need to work on improving our healthy options on a break room, in a break room. I just took a picture of the Survey Monkey so you can see how nicely kind of breaks down the responses. For example, what were the ages of the people that answered my responses? So it's a nice way of collecting data. So after we knew that there was a need, there was support, yes, there were some challenges that people had, what the next step was to actually know what were our goals and objectives in writing this policy. So what do we want to accomplish at the end of the day? So for us we wanted to create a guidelines for food and beverages that were served at staff meetings and events. So, and then the second was that we wanted to have a policy that also aligned that at least one item of food or beverage should be offered on the vending machines that meet the nutrition guidelines. So that was also important for our program. So after we had those goals, we developed and implemented and wrote the guidelines. We actually had a RD intern that was with us and helped research some guidelines and create a guidelines. We created those guidelines and then we developed an implementation plan. So we educated all the managers who ordered the foods for staff events or for events on the nutrition policies. And our executive director also said that it was important that and I'll show next that we created, let me actually go into that, a menu review request for the registered dietitian to review what were the items that were offered. So any event that had more than 12 people attending, the registered dietitian needed to review those events and make sure that it met the nutrition guidelines. And then we also ordered 3 new items for the vending machine to meet the nutrition guidelines that we developed. And then we also educated the staff at large on the nutrition guidelines. So this is also a nice handout that were provided to all the managers on healthy tips for meetings. So things like serving water instead of sugar drinks, using hummus instead of ranch for your dips and vegetables, placing the fruits and vegetables at the beginning of the buffet line, ordering 80% of the numbers expected to decrease and waste, serving the dressings and condiments on the sides, using a smaller plates and bowls for portion control, using fruit for dessert, avoiding fried foods, so using bake, boil, broach, etc. Making sure that you had a balanced meal for your buffet, 1 grain item, 1 protein, 1 vegetable, and cutting your sandwiches, your bagels, or your desserts in half. So that was kind of some ideas of how to make it healthy but also cost effective. The other thing that the dietetic intern did is that she visited the most used restaurants that we order food for events or activities. So she did how much would it cost for 20 people to serve if we were to order food from Safeway, from Jimmy's, or from the Round Table. So she created healthy menus for that and gave a proposed cost. So her point on this is showing that healthy food can be affordable. It can actually be more cheaper than what we were spending already on buying foods that were not as healthy. The next step after you create your policy, you create your objectives and your goal, you develop an implementation plan, is to monitor and evaluate how is that being implemented. So our goal here is to continue using the RD interns to provide in-service to staff and managers on the nutrition policy, and also evaluate how it's being implemented. And then our goal is also to review the policy every year and update it, and making sure that the staff is being educated on it. So what have we learned? So creating a policy can be really tricky. So creating a nutrition action committee, I think, would be really helpful to have representatives of different staff departments and administration, and of course the RD and the RD intern, so that everybody's on the same page and everybody has a buy-in on the changes. And then also continue to think about how you're going to measure your success. What are the data that you're collecting to make sure that you're being successful? And of course, I do want to acknowledge our dietetic interns that helped create this, Golden Gate dietetic interns, and especially Amelia Stumpley there that helped create a lot of the educational materials and so forth. And John DeVito, a registered dietitian here, that work with the dietetic intern creating the education. All right, any questions about our nutrition guideline policy implementation? Any thoughts or questions?
Thank you, Jamali.
You're welcome.
Sorry, I had to pop up. We're trying to figure out how to get the poll questions to come out. So does anybody have any questions for Jamali about her process for the food policy, or maybe thoughts about how you might be able to do that, a food policy, or even MOUs in your own communities, and thinking about maybe even next year as you're writing grant applications, what that might look like for you? Okay. I want to also say that I think that Jamali and Jennifer both do a really good job at seeking out community resources and finding those different partnerships. And they exist, and there's people that want to support what your programs are doing. And so, just asking, I think, can be the biggest barrier. But the worst thing they can say is no. And otherwise, you wouldn't have that partner if you didn't ask. And I just actually learned something new, that banks in your community have a federal requirement to do community development or kind of volunteerism type of stuff within your communities. So if you have a local bank branch, it wouldn't hurt to contact them, because they usually have to give some amount of time, either in-kind donations with staff time or actual donations for different projects like that. So that's another option of seeking out community resources. Monica, was that poll able to start?
Let me check and see here. While I'm pulling that up, thank you both for fantastic presentations. That was very helpful, very informative. You guys are doing awesome work. Unfortunately, it is still not allowing it.
Okay. Maybe we'll send you guys all those that are on this call, we'll send you an evaluation, and maybe you could fill it out and send it back to us so we can get some feedback for our presenters. And if we don't have any other questions, we can go. I wanted to give one more announcement that I forgot about, and that is our evaluator, Eugene, and also Michael Mudgett, who is our epidemiologist from CITE that supports ACORNS. They're putting on a 4-part evaluation series webinar series. Tomorrow at 11, from 11 to 12 is part 3 of that. So we've gone over doing intro or overview of evaluation and tool design and kind of data collection tools or data collection. And then Michael last week went over data management, and it's really interactive with lots of examples. We sent out those links in an email on Monday. And then this week will be help me remember what this next one is going to be. Analyzing that data, I believe. So how are you going to, once you've collected that data, kind of entered that data, how are you going to go about analyzing that data? And then the final one, which will be next Thursday, not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow, and it will be kind of reporting and sharing out that data for your different audiences. So talk about that. So definitely recommend and invite you all to join that tomorrow. We will be recording and sharing those if you aren't able to make that time, but just wanted to give a plug for that. Great. Does anyone have anything else they want to share before we say sayonara? Okay, well, thank you so much for your ladies' time and sharing and presenting your good work to everybody, and thanks for everybody that joined. And I hope you have a great Wednesday.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for presenting. Take care, everyone.
Bye.